Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Planet Air magazine. Welcome. We try, whenever possible, to give you some samples of some of our brand new video releases, and today is no exception. Today we have the incomparable Mark Shasha, and this one is called Shimmering Light. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Mark Shasha, and I've been a painter for 40 years. I live on the North Shore of Boston, and I'm so excited today that we're going to be doing a painting of something that I really have a passion for, which is the coast. A nice sunny day with shimmering light across the water and lots of texture in the sand and in the foliage. So let's get started. Okay, so let's talk about some of the materials that I'm going to be using in this painting to make this picture. We're going to start with seagull feathers, which I simply found at the beach. They're random. You can use any feathers that you happen to have. Sea sponges. I recommend that you use real sea sponges and not the artificial ones. Palette knives. A couple of bristle brushes. These are inexpensive brushes from the local hardware store. Nothing fancy there. I also have a variety of other brushes. We have a fan brush and some rounds and a couple of flats. I also have some rubber-tipped color shapers. Here's a bottle brush. This will be handy when we start doing some of the foliage. And also for foliage textures, I like to use straw, and I make my own brushes using Velcro strips like this, cutting some of the straw up and making my own brushes. Some straight edges, pencils, my value scale, and some very absorbent paper towels. I recommend something like Viva that's very absorbent, and a maul stick, which is going to hold my arm steady when I get into the detail work. So there's some of my tools that I'm going to be using. Now let's flip around and we'll talk about some of my paints. So let's talk about my palette today and the paints I'm going to be using for this painting. I don't really have a particular way of organizing my paints, so I'll just tell you what I have out here. I've kind of clustered them in groups. We have some earth tones here and warms and some cools later. We have here in this corner is some titanium white. Here is some raw umber, transparent red oxide, yellow ochre, raw sienna. This is Naples yellow, Indian yellow, cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, cadmium orange, cadmium red light, alizarin, rose madder, viridian, permanent green light, green earth, olive green, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, phthalo blue, and violet. So those are my paints, and you don't organize them in any particular way. This is just a habit of mine. What's important is that I have in my mind a place where I know where I can find my paint when I need it, and that's why it's where it is. All right, so now the next step is to do the drawing, and we're going to put the drawing on a vertical canvas. Now I want to show you that we're going to be using as a reference today a painting that I did on Martha's Vineyard. This is a horizontal painting. It's a plein air painting, and it's going to be my go-to today while I work on this painting. But of course the next step is to take this into a vertical design before we start drawing. So I have come up with a couple of ideas, and what I have is one where we have a little less sky and a little more sand, and this one we're going to put a little more sky, and I think I like this one better. This is the design that I think I want to go with because it gives me a chance to play a little bit with the light in the sky, and maybe we'll put a little cloud action there, and we can really talk about texture as well as light a little differently that way. So now for the drawing. Using this as a reference, I want my horizon to come down something like this to get to that. And so I'm going to take the pencil, and I'm just using an HB pencil today, and let's see, we're going to measure this so that I get a straight edge, straight line here. Let's see, we're going to get this down to about 7.5 inches. Let me firm this up for us. Go down to about here. And the same on this side. We'll put the horizon in first. Hang on. Using the straight edge, you'd think it get it straight here. That's not right. Let's see, we got it off already. How did I do that? 7.5, 7.5. That's why it's wrong. Let's straighten that out real quick. You can see what's wrong. If you have that horizon crooked, that's not going to work for you. So we now have a nice straight horizon. This is not going to be a complicated thing to do, but I want to make sure that I put a little bit of landmass on that horizon. And we'll have a little variety. We've got a little bit of maybe some distant hills and such. And here, I'm just going to draw where the grass, we're going to get the top of the grass. I may have gone a little bit. Get the top of the grass here. I'm just going to mark this out. It doesn't have to be perfect here. We're just going to do so much changing as we go. This is going to be the top of the grasses. We're going to have a little path here. Kind of coming down this way. Now what I'm doing here is I'm establishing where the water is going to be, where the sky is going to be, where we've got a bit of a horizon with some landmass out there. Now we have a little organic area where we've got the foliage, and I'm going to go back to this picture again real quick. See what I'm doing? We're drawing in this path just to mark out where that's going to be. Got a little path back here, but this is the one that gets more footprints. So we're going to, using this design right here, we're just going to take the pencil and mark out generally where this grass is going to be. That's going to be in this zone right here. And I'm just referring to that little sketch while I do this. So we have a nice slope coming this way, a slope coming this way, coming down, and that's going to be a lot of fun for working on textures, because I'm going to be able to talk about how the sand slopes down. That's going to be great. Now this, I think this grass could go up just a little bit higher, but it really doesn't matter where we put that just at the moment. I think I just want to make sure I've got plenty of room there. Take a look at my sketch over here. Yeah, something like this. That grass line is going to go out here. This doesn't leave a lot of room for the water, but it leaves enough because we're going to have a nice shine on the water right over here, and you'll get to see how that contrasts with this side of the painting. We're going to just let that light move across the water, and then we're going to let it move right down across our painting, across the grasses. So let's make this path a little bit more distinct. Something like this, right? Yeah, it's not a very complicated drawing, but it tells us that the grasses are going to be in here and in there, and then down here we're going to have a clump of grass. And this is basically going to be sand. Some of it is going to be in light, some of it's going to be in shadow. And I like those shapes. I like how this drawing will invite us right into the picture. I'm going to do an underpainting on this, something very simple and basic to get started. And that's the next step. First, I'm going to just give this a quick spray of fixative, and we'll move on to the underpainting. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go into the underpainting, and it's really not going to be very complicated. It's just, the point here is to just mark out the shapes where they are, and very, very lightly. I don't want to put too much underpainting on this. I want plenty of white canvas under there. And so let's get started. I start an underpainting usually by taking a little bit of Gamsol and covering the canvas with it. I'm going to have a wash. Very, very, very faint wash. You'll see how faint it is. And when I say faint, I mean a very high value. So I'm not going to want to go any darker than, say, this range. This being white, let me get that out of the way. This being white, and then 9, and then 8 and 7. So I don't want to go too dark anywhere on this underpainting. I'm just going to give it a light wash to give the paint that I'm going to apply a little, kind of like a watercolor. You want it to kind of move around. You also want it to be able to be quick and easy to wipe off if you put on too much. So I take this chip brush. This is the cheapest brush I have. It's about 90 cents. And it's very, very useful for this kind of painting. You'll see me use it quite a lot, and we'll get into where and why I use it. All right, now on my palette, I'm just going to take a little bit of that transparent red oxide here. So we're going to start putting just a little bit of this tint. It's really all it is a bit of a tint on the canvas. I'm starting with the shape of the grass, where the grasses are going to be. And this is not a time to get into details. It's really just, what we're doing is we're marking out the general placement of where some of the shapes are going to be and making a little bit of a commitment about it. I think that's going to be, it's not too strong. That's good. So, and I want to keep it very thin for another reason, because I want to paint in a few hours. I'm going to have this, I want this to dry quickly for us. I don't want this to be a long wait. So by keeping the paint thin, we can mark out where the shadows are going to be, and we can get right to it within a couple of hours. You just want to make sure you're using just a little bit of transparent red oxide. You could do this with burnt umber also, if you'd rather. I like the warmth that I get out of the transparent red oxide. It comes in handy later if you have to scratch off a little bit of paint. And that's another reason why we're doing the underpainting. If you lose your way and you put the wrong color down for whatever reason, you can wipe that color right off and your underpainting is waiting for you underneath, reminding you of exactly where your drawing was, so you don't lose at least that part of your work. You see me filling in this patch with a little bit of color. Just let that, we're going to let this dry. And back here we have the horizon. Now I'm calling it the horizon. Technically the real horizon would be somewhere behind that landmass, but we don't need to get picky. We'll just call it the horizon. It's right out there somewhere. The line suffices. I'm just going to wipe some of that off. Whoops. Make sure your canvas, make sure it's tight. There we go. And just going to adjust that a little bit. Happens all the time. There we go. Nice and snug. All right, I will put in some of the sand just to mark out where some of the sand is going to be turning down, because here we've got the path, and I'm going to be saying this quite often. I want to be paying attention to the angles and the slopes of things. As the sand comes down here, it's going to bend, it's going to turn, and there's going to be little pockets, places where the light's not getting in. I just want to mark out some of that because that's going to be part of the design of our painting. Paying attention to the placement of those shadows. Put some over here too. So it's a nice inviting composition, brings us right in. And then we're going to have a nice bright spot over here on the water, and then this part of the water is going to be just a little bit darker, but you'll see that when we get into the color. Don't want to do much more than this right now. I'll take out that my scale here, my value scale, so we can talk a little bit about how this is staying in that range. I don't have any real dark things going on the canvas yet. All right, so now it's time to move on to local color. Let's do that next. For the sake of speed for this video, I have switched out the underpainting that I had before so that we're using a dry one so we can get right into the paint here. And this one is dry and ready to go, and so we're going to get into coloring this thing right now. Now, as we approach this painting, what I want to do is start from the farthest part of the scene and move forward. So I'm going to start with the sky, and then I'm going to do the water and this horizon and this body, this landmass back here. Then we'll do the foliage, or maybe we'll do the sand first and then we'll do the foliage. We'll see. But that's the process. The reason for that is because it's easier to paint over something rather than around something. So if you can imagine me painting something here, then I've got to paint the ocean around it. You'll see what I'm talking about as we get going. Now, what we're doing here is local color. And by local color, I mean the general color for each piece of this painting. The general color for the foliage, the general color for the sky, and so on. So we'll start, as I say, with the sky, and I'm going to use these chips. This is this chip system that I've used, which basically each one of these chips is a color that I found in nature when I was out there doing this plein air painting. And each one of these colors matches the color that I ended up using. So we'll be using this. I will be using these colors to get to make sure that I have accurate representation of what I saw that day. So we're going to start with the sky, which is this color, and it starts with a white. I'm just going to take some warm white right here, and I'm going to add a little cobalt blue. And I'm going to need a little bit of, I'm going to add a little orange to it. See how this goes. Looking to get that color just right. It's got a little bit more, I think a little bit of ultramarine blue. Mixing that blue up like this. Going to add a little bit of cerulean. Just take a little bit of this soft mixing white as well. Yeah, it's getting much closer. I think that cerulean really warmed it up. A little more. I'll take some titanium white. I'm trying to keep that value nice and high. I'm not adding anything to darken it. And you can see I'm getting real close. Adding a little more white to this. Right like that. There you go. So now I've got the color. Make a nice little pile of this. And get my brush out. I'm going to use a nice big brush for this. I'm going to use this chip brush, same one that I used for getting the underpainting underway, and just cover the sky with this. Let me just do a little. I've actually pre-mixed some of this sky paint, this sky color, on this chip, and you can see my pre-mix is the same color and the same value as what I had before. That's what I mixed for you. Just going to fill this all in. I'm going to add a little more white to it, just so it gives us a little bit of value to work with. Yeah. Just go ahead and spread the paint as evenly as you can. Again, this is the local color. And local color just means the general color of that particular patch of the painting, the general color of the sky. I'm going to go all the way down to that horizon and the landmass there with this, and I'm just filling in all the little white specks here. I'm going to fill it all in. I want to use plenty of paint here. It's okay. Just cover that canvas. Got plenty of paint, so might as well use it. There we go. So this is a sunny day, a bright sunny summer day, or maybe it's early fall, but you've got a nice blue sky here. It's pretty clear. We might put some clouds in later just so that we can emphasize the light a little better. The whole objective here is to paint the light and to capture that really bright color of that kind of a day. And if we put a little bit of clouds up there in the sky, that'll help us to reinforce the light source and tell us where the light source is coming from. Anything we can do, and we'll get to that. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but now we've laid the sky, we've put the sky in, and now we can move to the next part, which is the water right here. I recently learned a quick way to get the color of water, especially the color of the ocean, from a distance. And I'll show you what I do. I used to use a lot of purple and brown and green, because when you look at the ocean, you see a lot of different colors. And it's tempting to just keep adding things. Before you know it, you've got a great big muddy mess. But what I do, let's see if I can, I'm going to use a different brush for this. I actually start with a little bit of this phthalo blue. And then I add some alizarin. Doesn't look very much like the ocean yet, but watch what happens when I add some white to that. Just take some titanium white, and it just turns into this really lovely ocean color. Just a beautiful blue. The red mixes with the phthalo to give us a little bit of a purplish thing. And there's already a greenish component in the phthalo. I can add a little more red to that. And we get a little more of the purpley stuff coming through. Just add a little more white to that. And that's how I get to the color of the ocean. Now I have, similar to the sky, I've already mixed some sea color here. And you'll see that I have a little more white in that mix. This is the color we're going for, so I'm going to add more white to this. We'll see if we can get that up to speed. And if we can't, that's fine. I can try something else. Yeah, I think I want to start with a little more white. When you have to lighten a color, it's a lot easier to start with the white and then add some of the color into it. See what I mean? I think this needs something to even warm it up even more. I'm going to add just a little bit of this yellow ochre to that. Just to warm. Whoops! Now I've really gone far astray. Yeah, that's not working at all. Let's do something else. I'm going to put some more white down. All right. So I'm just going to remove this. It was a bad idea to put any ochre in there. I was looking to warm up the color and I went too far. Ochre is no good. So we're going to take that phthalo. We're going to add a little more red to it. Something like this. Yeah, here we go. And Let me get that color. That's much closer. Okay, good. And this would be good for a darker sea, and this is a little bit more for the sea that we have today. You can see that mixes right in nicely. So now I'm going to take my brush, my number 8 round. I don't need a lot of this paint. I've spent more time mixing it than I'm going to spend painting it. And I'm just going to put it right on the ocean there, right where our water is. Now later on I might want to come in and darken this, but as I've said before, this is all about being attentive to my original notations when I was out in the field, and I found these colors there and I'm bringing them into the studio. Very often we get tempted to go off our chart and try other things, and there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely fine, but you want to do it in a position of control. Get all your colors in first. Let's get in let's get those local colors in first, and then we can play with it afterward. I'm leaving a little bit of thinness here because I know I'm going to wipe all that off in this area. This is our hot spot. The sun is right up here, and it's going to be beaming down directly below it, right onto that spot, and we're going to be paying attention to how the rays of sun are coming out this way and kind of spreading that shimmer. But right now, we're just going to get the local color in right there. So I'm going to go right into where the grasses are going to be here, and I'm just going to take that ocean color right here. You're watching me ignore this landmass on the other side of our water there. I'll come back to it because it's easier to paint over this. I've got another thing I want to do in the sky, so we'll do that first and then we'll put in the landmass. But before we do that, I want to do the foliage, what I'm calling the foliage, and that's this whole area where we have mostly grasses. You know what? I'm changing my mind. We're not going to do the foliage next. We're going to do the sand next. I want to put the sunny sand in. And that gives me an opportunity to talk about values and how we have to pay attention to things. About how we have to pay attention to what's light and what's dark, and if we don't, we're going to get in big trouble. This painting is going to have a really bright spot in it. Almost, well, it's going to be pure white when we're done right here. There's going to be some really bright high values. So try to imagine if we put that bright white here, and then we also put that bright white here, and where the sun is shining on all of that sand, this will not read as brightness, or it may not read as very bright, and it'll just be very confusing. This needs to be, whether we like it or not, a little bit darker than that bright white. So the color that I found when I was out there painting that plein air painting is this color. That's what color the sand was. That's the color of the sand in the sun, right here. And look how different that is from white. It's quite a bit different. So there's a value here to pay attention to, and you're going to see, I think, that it'll look a little strange. I'm just going to clear off this ocean color, and I'm going to put it over here, keep it in a little pile, and I'm going to take this darker ocean stuff and put that over here, and I'm going to clean this off. I'm going to start with some white, like that, and I'm going to take some transparent red oxide and add just a little bit of transparent red oxide so that I can get a little bit of a color. I'm not looking for a really dense color here. I'm looking for something a little pale, almost like a pastel value here. Let's take a look and compare that to the chip on my chart here. You can see that this is very close. It's really just white and a little bit of transparent red oxide. And I'm going to add now, though, just a little hint of yellow ochre, like this. And that's our color. So in a similar way, I have pre-mixed a little bit of that color so that we can make this come together a little more quickly. And I have enough, you can see that this is the color of the sand in the sun. We've got it. Very simple mix, not complicated at all. And now I'm going to take my brush, same brush, cleaned off. It's the number 8 round. Get a lot of paint on it. Go ahead and do that. And now I'm just going to paint into the white areas of where the sun is hitting that sand. And isn't it interesting how dark it looks? It looks really dark. But it isn't. It's not really dark at all. But relative to everything else that's on the canvas, it looks dark. And it's hard maybe to imagine that this color could possibly be adequately bright to read as sun, sand with sun on it. But it should in the end. If it doesn't, we can lighten it. But this is, again, the local color. It is the general color of the sand where the sun is hitting it. And let me just stabilize my easel a little bit. I'm not really. So again, we're going to pay attention to the slopes later. Right now, we're just dealing with the abstract shape of that kind of, it's almost like a puzzle piece. And we're filling in that puzzle piece with that color. And we're committed to that color for now. This is the color that was out there that day. And I want to make sure I get it in accurately. I'm not painting over the other patches. I'm trying to avoid that a little bit so that I can still read out where those are. I don't want to lose my way. Remember, if I do lose my way, I can just erase or wipe off the paint. And my underpainting is still there waiting for me if I need it. It's easier to darken a color that's light rather than to lighten a color that is already dark. So it's good if you're working wet into wet like we are today. If I have to darken the paint, let's do that later. We'll start with this local color, nice and bright. So to do the sand in shadow, we're going to need a different approach. That's a darker color. So instead of warm, transparent red oxide for this, we're going to go for a cool neutral. And we already have figured this out. And in this case, it's a very cool neutral. It's actually almost blue. But I'm going to make it probably a little more neutral than that in the end. It may look to you very similar to this, but it's a blue-gray. blue, it's a gray which is leaning really toward the blues. So let me do this. We'll, first of all, let me just wash off this brush, get this prepared. I'm going to use the same brush for this. And I'm going to take, to make this color, I'm going to use my knife. You've noticed that I'm using my knife to mix a lot of my colors. It's easier this way. I could use a brush, but it really messes up a brush. Fills your brush with paint, and it's not necessary. Let's take some ultramarine blue so it's nice and cool. And now I'm going to get some raw umber. The raw umber is a cool brown. And so this should be but it has some, it's warmer than the ultramarine blue by quite a lot, of course. So it's kind of, I've got a little ways to go. I can make this darker. I'm going to add a little more blue, add a little more brown, and let's see. I like the neutral. I like it when it's really neutral. But we're going to stick to our chip here, which says it's more toward the blue. So we'll find out how that works. If we need to darken it, we can do that. The chip is not something that I have to use. It's just something that will guide me. It is a record of the color that I saw out there. So if I can adhere to that closely, it should work. And I want to talk about that. Yeah, that's pretty close, but I want to go a little darker. Just to make sure I get closer to that. Just a little closer is good. Let's do that. It's taking a minute, but it's worth it. There we go. That's more like it. So this is the color, the general local color of the sand in shadow. Let's see how it works. It should work. Well, it looks awfully blue. Yeah, it could stand to be a little browner. I'll add a little bit of raw umber to that. It won't hurt. That's the way to go when you find out that it's a little too blue. Just add a little raw umber. The thing is, because it is a shadow, we don't want to have too much chroma in there. I want to keep it toward the neutrals. And all right, so let's just fill that in. You can see how bright the sand begins to look in this area, right? So I'm just going to fill this in. I want you to do this with, don't worry too much about the edges exactly. Now is not the time for that, but we'll get to it. And we just want to get that shadow in. Now the reason the shadows are cool, of course we have that warm sun. It doesn't look warm yet, we're going to get to it, but that warm sun is coming down here, and the light is going to be this warm heat coming from that kind of that yellow golden color that the sun will do. But on this side behind us, the sky is a deeper blue. And that deep blue that glow is coming right into those shadows. Since the sun is not reaching these shadows, that blue color from behind you is reaching the shadows. And that's why the shadows are blue, or I should say cool. In this case, they're pretty blue, yeah. So let's just bring this shadow right down here. So we've got a sense now of the shape of this sandmass, this dune, the slope coming this way, coming down here. There's going to be like a little hill, and that's coming down this way, and we're going to be kind of, moving the sand down a slope. We're paying attention to the slope as we do the sand. And again, we're still just doing the local color. I'm just going to hit this with the bottom of this foliage. This is the massive foliage. I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of that cool, because there's going to be shadow on this side anyway. And again, local color, just getting a little bit of it in there. We're going to come back to this, so I'm going to save some of this paint for later. All right.
For over 40 years, Mark Shasha has been sharing his love of storytelling through his artwork. Living by the sea in New England provides him with an endless amount of subject matter to do what he enjoys, coming upon a scene with an irresistible passion to capture something about it, not with someone else in mind or with the idea of selling it. He desires to claim something of the moment for himself and to enjoy painting the story into his work.
I've been a painter for 40 years. I live on the North Shore of Boston, and I'm so excited today that we're going to be doing a painting of something that I really have a passion for, which is the coast. A nice sunny day with shimmering light across the water and lots of texture in the sand and in the foliage.
Mark says, "My paintings evoke many things in me. Glimpses of my years, mementos, solitary hours, far-flung adventures, passionate struggles, and good times with dear friends." In Shimmering Light, you'll immediately feel Mark's passion for painting light and color along a bright and sunny coast. You'll see how Mark's paintings are his personal views, his own creations of scenes which matter to him in the moment. What catches Mark's attention isn't always obvious to other people, and even his own reasons for the immediate attraction are sometimes forgotten as the years go by.
This chip system that I've used, which basically each one of these chips is a color that I found in nature when I was out there doing this plein air painting.
By sharing his special blend of storytelling, passion, and painting, Mark's goal is to help you discover how to paint what you love and different ways to make the elements in your work look and feel natural. You'll be so pleased when you see sand and grass come to life rather than looking like dull patches of tan and green. In his decades of experience, Mark has created methods that can be used in almost any landscape painting. Learning from such an experienced artist will help you advance quickly and without getting tripped up in trial and error. You can skip the experimenting and incorporate Mark's techniques into your own work right away. This course contains many crucial learning points from Mark that will benefit you tremendously.
Well, that is Mark Shasha, and the video is called Shimmering Light. You can learn more about it at streamline.art. And remember, we have a discount for you up in the comments section. Just grab the code there. Now let's get right to our interview with Mark Shasha. Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. Welcome to Interviews with the Artist. Our guest today is an artist from the East. His name is Mark Shasha. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Well, I'm very interested in your career path and everything about yourself as an artist. I like, first off, I like your work. I like your style. You and I have met at the Plein Air Convention. You're always the guy in the tuxedo, and I'm a little offended you didn't wear your tuxedo today.
Well, I actually thought of it. I considered it. But,
now, tell me about that, because that's kind of become a trademark for you. What's the story behind that?
Well, first of all, I do it because it's fun, and I got into the habit of doing it because I love people, and it seems to attract people. When I'm out painting in a tuxedo, I seem to get lots of people come around. They check out my painting. They bring me donuts and coffee. I don't know. It's a great conversation starter.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. If I'm doing a painting and it's not coming out well, wearing a tuxedo kind of makes it feel better. The other thing is if the painting comes out well, I'm in a tuxedo. I'm ready to party. So it's a win-win.
Well, I teach marketing for artists, and I think that every artist kind of needs a trademark, and you've kind of made that your own. It's it's because when you're at the convention, the plein air convention, you see you're the only artist wearing a tuxedo, and you're up there demoing and painting in a tuxedo, and it gets a lot of attention. Now, you were telling me last night about how this kind of all began. It had something to do with theater.
Right. I do a lot of acting, and there's one theater in Marblehead where I do a lot of shows. And years ago, I would do shows, and we'd be in full costume, or especially a singing show where we're singing Cole Porter or something like that. And then I might not be in Act 2. Right. But I've got to come back out for the curtain call.
Right.
So what I would do is leave the theater for an hour while they're doing Act 2, and I'd be in my costume. I'd be in if it was a tuxedo or whatever, and go to the nearby restaurant, and my waiter is he knows I'm coming, and he's got my shrimp cocktail and a glass of wine waiting for me. And I sit there and I read the news, and but people would come up to me and say, "Well, aren't you overdressed? And what are you doing? Where are you going? What are you up to?"
Right.
And I would just say, "Well, I'm in a show." And they'd say, "Well, why aren't you in the show now?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the show. I just have to go back in a minute for the curtain call, because they're going to, they're going to have cast call at the end." So that got into. I have another friend who she and I go out and we dress up and we paint in the park. And in fact, I'm a member of the Guild of Boston Artists, and every summer, Gene Lightman and I, who's the president, we go out and we paint in the park. And I'm the only one that shows up in a tuxedo. But the whole point is, people see us, they see me in my tuxedo, they come over, they ask us what we're doing, and it's a great outreach to the Boston community. We're in the Boston Public Garden, we're out painting, and we have extra easels for them.
Oh, you
do?
do?
Yeah, we have put paints out for people, and we teach, we make it a day project. It's fun.
I like hearing that, because as you know, I'm a big plein air enthusiast,
Oh, yeah.
Outdoor painting enthusiast, and when people come up to me when I'm out painting, they always say the same thing. They always say, "I wish I could do that, but I don't have any talent. I can't even draw a stick figure." It's almost like a script.
Right.
And I always say, "Yes, you can do this. Let me show you how." And I'll say, "Come over here," and I'll take their hand and I'll dip it in the mixture, mix a little color, and I'll take their hand and I'll make a streak. And I said, "No, now you do that on your own." I said, "You can't mess up my painting."
Yeah.
But what I try to do is to get people to have the light go off, to realize, hey, I could do this. And I think that's a great idea. I'm going to steal that idea.
Yeah, you should, because, we had a great story. There was a guy who used to work at Filene's Basement in Boston.
Yeah.
And he had moved to another job, and he had just had his last day of work, and he was walking through the public garden, and he saw us out painting. And we had all these extra easels with canvases on them and everything, and paints ready to go for anybody who wanted to stop by. And he said, "What are you up to?" We told him, and we got him to start painting. He's still painting 3 years later.
Really?
And he sent us a lovely note about what it meant to him to just bump into us out painting that day. So I want to do painting in the park this summer. I've got a really busy schedule, but we're talking about doing it again.
I think that's really great, and I love seeing that with adults and also with kids.
Yeah.
And to see the light go off in their head that, hey, I can do this.
Yeah, he had never done this.
What I think is interesting is painting changes people's lives.
Yeah.
Now, how has painting changed your life?
Oh my God. Wow, what a question.
Well, you've been doing it for a long time.
I've been an artist all my life.
Yeah.
I've been painting. It's the only thing I've ever really done is art
Right.
of various kinds. I like telling stories with my pictures. I like getting lost in my paintings. I think my artwork has always been me being very, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like daydreaming and getting lost in whatever I'm creating. And I used to want to be a filmmaker for a while. I like acting, as you know, and I like photography. I had a little darkroom when I was a kid. I love science. I am just ravenous with muses. I'm full of muses. There's desires to do things. And when I am painting, I get all that kind of goes into the work. It goes into this passion, goes into it, whether it's the beach, which is a true amazing passion for me. But it's not the superficial quality of it. It's the marine biology that's in the water. It's the flora and the fauna, the science of how the light is moving across the sand, the physics of it. I love the atmosphere. I'm fascinated with that. And I'm also fascinated in the history of the place. What else happened on this beach? What's
Right.
what boats have come up here or gone by before? And I don't know. I think painting is a way for me to live in all of that beauty and try to make it happen in real life in a way.
What I have found is that I can only speak to my own experience, but I became a much happier person once I started painting. And it was almost like there had been something missing in my life. I didn't know what it was. I certainly never even considered painting as an option.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so driven to get people outdoors painting, because, you know, a lot of us are not outdoorsy type people.
Right.
I mean, I've never been an athlete. You know, I might do some hiking or fishing, but I've never been that person who was always outdoors.
Yeah.
But by getting outdoors and painting, you see things differently. So
Yeah.
you mentioned that you had been a photographer.
Yeah, I like photography.
And I was a photographer, and I realized that I would fly all the way across the world to get a shot of something iconic. And I'd set up, I'd do that shot. 20 minutes later, maybe 10 minutes later, I'm on to the next thing. It's like that Chevy Chase movie, Vacation, where they drive all the way across the country. They get to the Grand Canyon, and he goes, right? And so,
Yeah.
but painting slows us down.
Right.
You know, now all of a sudden, instead of spending 10 minutes in a location, you're spending 2, 3, 4 hours, and you see things differently, don't you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I have a show opening up in Boston at the Guild of Boston Artists this summer, which is going to be, the title of it is Breaking for Beauty, which is what I do. I see that as my life. I stop, I want to pause, I want to look, I take a break, and I trust my instinct that there's something here that has now stopped me and attracted me, and I want to pursue it and explore it. And I want to find out what it is. But it takes time. I set up and I'm like, I don't really know all the time what it is that's hooked me.
Right.
And as I say to my students, beauty can be obvious, or it could just be some truth that's under the surface that's getting you. And I also find that, you know, getting back to painting as a way to express yourself. I mean, as an artist, everything I've done, I didn't even realize this till a few years ago, but everything about me is expression. I love acting because I like to express myself. I love to paint because I like to express myself. And I sing, I play guitar, and I've done these things professionally because I don't know, I think that's the thing in me, is to express, and I think it brings peace to people when they find out that they can express themselves. That's why an art education is so crucial, because if you don't have an art education, if you don't know how to express yourself, you're going to be frustrated in life. You're going to find things, you're going to want to say something about it. You won't be able to articulate it, because painting is a language. It's not just a language to, you don't only learn to speak that language, but you have to learn to listen to it and hear it when it's being spoken.
So let's talk about that art education piece, because I think that's something that probably intimidates a lot of people. If someone watching us right now is thinking, well, maybe I should try this painting thing, where do they begin? What is the process you'd recommend? You know, you had the benefit of a lifetime of doing this, but as you look back now and you teach a lot of students, what are the essentials that they've absolutely got to get down, and how do they even go about doing that?
Well, first off, I have an answer to that, because I have lots of workshop students who did something else their whole life, and then at the age of 50 or something, they decided, you know, they'd like to try this painting thing. And I'm all for that. I love that. And I think what you do is, if you're in that situation, just pick up the paint and start doing it, and don't care what anyone thinks. Don't try to judge yourself harshly. Don't do that. Just, if you like the color red, paint red today. Just have fun, and don't worry about it. Then as you go along and you start thinking and let the muses start to kick in. Oh, wait a minute, I've been painting red, but I'd like to paint a red rose. Now you start to do a little inquiring about, how do I paint a rose? What do I do there? And there's lots of material, as you've provided a bunch of them with artists all over the place. Start doing a little, when you're ready, start learning a little bit about how to do this. And it's not hard. The first steps are easy, and you can start with sketching and just have fun.
You know, we tend to beat ourselves up. All right. And I can recall some friends of mine who signed up for an art class I recommended that I was in, and but at a different time. And they went to one lesson and they just said, "This is too frustrating. I can't do this." We beat ourselves up. We think that there is this natural talent that we're born with, and we tell ourselves that we don't have that natural talent. Do you believe that there is such a thing as natural talent, and do you believe that someone who doesn't have natural talent can learn to paint?
I think someone who has no experience at all with painting or any inclination to paint can pick up paint and find out that they love it and they want to do it. I don't know about talent. I think there are people, and I thought I was one of them, I'm not sure I am, who has a propensity for this, an inclination, an ability to do it sort of naturally. I don't think there's anything natural. I think, well, maybe there is. But what I find a lot is that sometimes people think they want to be artists when all they really want to be is free. They want to be free to follow their dream or the thing they love. And so they think be an artist is to do that. And I think everyone should try to be an artist if that's what they want to try. And don't be intimidated by what you don't know. You know, it's really, it's a lovely discovery. It's a journey. And you can take it as far as you want to go. And you mentioned before, you know, we beat ourselves up about it. Yeah. Well, what happens with some of us is that the more we paint, we want to paint better. And we want to be better. We want to, because ultimately it's about freedom. Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could paint like a John Singer Sargent, just take my paints and paint whatever I want to paint? Wouldn't that be just so free? If I picked up a guitar and I could play every chord, I could express myself perfectly. And that's the goal. That's the holy grail. So we fight. So yeah, I would love that level of freedom. But I think not everybody, you know, that's why I beat myself up when it's not perfect.
Well,
I want it to be
and
perfect.
here's the rub. We'll go to a surgeon.
Yeah.
And we don't believe for a second that a surgeon has natural talent. He or she may have a special ability to take it a little further than that other person.
Yeah.
But they went to school, they went to college, they went to grad school, they went to medical school, then they went to their specialty thing. And so they've spent 20 years, 30 years learning their craft. We know that if you go to Carnegie Hall and you listen to a great pianist, we know that pianist started out with piano lessons, learning, you know, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and learning the keyboard and trying things over and over again. And we know that there's a process that these people have to follow. Yet there's this belief that with artists, you should just be able to walk up to a canvas and paint a beautiful painting. And the thing I always try to get across to people is this is a learned process. Yeah. Now, there is talent that some people absolutely have where they can take it to the next level. But you and I know hundreds of very proficient, very good painters who make a living as painters who don't have that special talent. Yeah. And you know, the reality is there's a very few people who can have that extra 2% of talent that takes them to being at the level of a Richard Schmid or a, somebody of that nature.
Well, maybe this is it too. Is it Malcolm Gladwell wrote that great book about, the title's escaping me, but it's about 10,000 hours doing a thing.
Right.
And I think that gets to do with passion. I mean, if you're a kid and you're passionate, I mean, I can tell you what happened to me. My mother was a bit of a painter. She'd do a little plein air painting. This was in the 60s and 70s.
She did plein air painting.
A little bit of outdoor painting. She did indoor too, but I remember her painting outside in Woodstock, Vermont years ago. We used to have a ski house, and I'm a downhill skier. And she'd be out there painting, and I have this memory of her, and I still have some of her tubes of paint. And every once in a while, I put a little on my palette. She's got the original manganese blue, by the way, which is hard to get now. So I got a tube of that. But where I was going is that one day she took me to the Mystic Outdoor Art Festival. I was about 7 or 8, maybe 8 years old, something like that. And there was an artist who was at the easel, just out at the festival, doing these amazing, to me, dunes. Just dune paintings with these moody skies and seagulls flying. And, today we'd call it kitsch, but it was because very predictable. But I just was blown away. And I saw him take this very thin brush and make these brush strokes to make the grass. And I just couldn't wait to get home to try that with my oil paints that my grandmother had given me. And I remembered the guy's last name was Noble. But years later, when the internet came along and I started looking for his name, I would type in Noble artist, and I would just get these paintings of kings and queens and stuff. It didn't work, and I didn't know how to I couldn't get further than that. He wasn't a famous painter. And a couple years ago, I was in Provincetown, where I go all the time with my wife, and I was out painting the National Seashore. I go back to the room where my wife had arranged this hotel room, and over the bed, there was one of those old prints, going blue, fading and old.
Right.
And I knew right from the door, oh, that's a Noble. And I walked up, and I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it. And I finally saw his name, Dana Gibson Noble. And I looked him up. I saw more about him. I learned about his life a little bit. I think that was a huge influence in my life.
Sure. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
But, it's whether he had talent, I don't know. Whether I had talent, I don't know. But I know that the passion, that was what drove me to paint and draw. And I wanted to write. I wanted to write movies. I wanted to do film. My passions. I got way too many passions.
Well, that's a nice thing to have.
I'm jiggling in my seat.
And see, I think too, going back to this talent discussion, I think that talent really is passion.
Yeah.
That it's that kid who can draw really, really well.
Yeah.
I remember in the 4th grade, a kid next to me could draw really, really well. And I thought, this guy's got talent. Well, what I didn't realize is that he sat there hours and hours and hours and copied things and learned and drew, and that's where that talent comes in. It's practice, it's passion to for practice and so on. Well, I think that it's really interesting to see that influence. I have similar experiences, and that's why I think when you're outdoors painting and you hand the brush to somebody, you might have just changed their life. And I think that's pretty cool. So what are the influences on your career that you think have had a huge impact on taking yourself to the next level in terms of either living or deceased artists?
Oh, wow. That's just a really long list. Well, there are some obvious ones. The Dana Gibson Noble story that I just told you. David Levine, who used to do illustration for the New York Times, not the New York Times Book Review, but the New York Review of Books. When I was a kid, my father had those stacks, and I would just go through and see his extraordinary caricatures. And he used to do these pen and ink things, and I, of course, had pen and ink, and I tried to copy all of them. I loved doing these cross hatches and stuff. That's a big influence. But I was also very influenced by Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah, Jacques Cousteau was not known or thought of as an artist, but what a cinematographer, what a storyteller, what an explorer. His love of the world, his love of science, and he was a heck of a poet. If you listen to the way he wrote about, love and loss of beautiful parts of the world, beautiful parts of the ocean. The poets have always, known the sort of forlorn, that ache. And then when I got to the Rhode Island School of Design, I did have several extraordinary mind-expanding things. One big influence for me was, one that blew me away was Joseph Albers, who was a protege of...
Well, he taught at the Rhode Island School, didn't he?
Well, Joseph Albers didn't teach there, but Cy Silman did, who was one of his proteges.
Okay, because Albers taught somewhere. I don't
Well, he
remember.
was at the Bauhaus,
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah, I think he went to Yale later, but Cy Silman from the Bauhaus blew my mind with color. I mean, he just would take a red, he'd ask the class, he'd hold up the color red, he'd say, "What color is that?" And we'd say, "Red, red." Everybody would say, "Red, it's obviously red." Then he'd put it against something, another color, and it immediately turned green. Just turned green right in front of your eyes. And that just was mind-blowing.
Right, that whole comparison thing.
Oh yeah, and then I had Chris Van Allsburg for a teacher, but I mean I had this. That's another story we could talk about of my diversion into graphic design, which was a train wreck and didn't go well. Because I discovered that graphic design is all about simplifying something complicated, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't realize till I was in it that I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be an illustrator where you take something simple and you complicate it, make it interesting. It's a different way of thinking, but that's a diversion. But I ended up going to a class where a young teacher at the time, Chris Van Allsburg, had just published a book called The Garden of Abdul Ghazazi, and he was transforming the publishing world with children's books because it was early days, but there was a transformation in the world of illustration. Illustration was leaving magazines and sort of where it normally was, and illustrators were looking for a new place to draw. And Chris Van Allsburg, who was a writer and a great illustrator, was doing these really intense, beautiful drawings. And, I love movies. I wanted to make movies, but this was like making movies without having to worry about collaborating with anybody.
Right.
You could just write your little story and draw your pictures, and I was full of ideas for stories. So having Chris Van Allsburg for a teacher, he was just, I could go on and on. It was a really extraordinary experience. And of course, he went on to do Jumanji and the Polar Express, and he was working on, I don't know, he had only done 3 books when I was at RISD, and now, of course, he's done dozens of books, I think. I don't know. I'm not.
In terms of historic painters, is there a particular painting that if there was no limitation on your budget and you could pick up the phone and call any museum in the world and say, "I want that painting delivered to my house on Thursday."
Yeah.
Is there a painting?
The Fountain by John Singer Sargent. It was at the Art Institute of Chicago. I've had this kind of experience, and I get goosebumps talking about this. I might even get a little teary. I was in Chicago for my cousin who was having some issues, and I was visiting with her. And I was just there for a week, and I had never been to the Art Institute. So this was about 15 years ago.
It blows you away.
So I was walking through, and I'm blown away, and these are so exciting. It's so exciting to be there. What wonderful paintings. I go into the American Wing, I go into the John Singer Sargent room here, and I take a left under some door, I remember an archway, but there may not have been one. That may be embellishment, but I took a left and I looked and I saw the fountain. That's the painting where there's a man leaning in as a woman is sitting on the edge of a fountain, and she's painting at an easel, and there's the fountain going on behind them, and then behind that is a big dark tree. I stood there for 3 hours. studying that painting. I had seen it in books, I had seen it all my life, and I swear it looked like John Singer Sargent had taken one brush stroke and just gone like that. And that woman's hand was all right there in that brush stroke. Fingers, fingernails. I just couldn't understand how could he do it. I've told my students, John Singer Sargent is like the Jimi Hendrix of painting, because we have, just like Jimi Hendrix, we have the instrument. We know we know where the strings are. There's a limited number of places you can put your fingers, right? We have John Singer Sargent's palette. We know what paints he used. We have his brushes. Nobody can do this. It's just, there are some, and you talk about talent. I mean, come on. He just knew what to do. And you just wonder, think of the freedom of that.
Well, that is Mark Shasha and Shimmering Light. You can learn more about the full-length video at streamline.art. Remember, we have a discount code for you in the comments section. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. Bye-bye.
For over 40 years, Mark Shasha has been sharing his love of storytelling through his artwork. Living by the sea in New England provides him with an endless amount of subject matter to do what he enjoys, coming upon a scene with an irresistible passion to capture something about it, not with someone else in mind or with the idea of selling it. He desires to claim something of the moment for himself and to enjoy painting the story into his work.
I've been a painter for 40 years. I live on the North Shore of Boston, and I'm so excited today that we're going to be doing a painting of something that I really have a passion for, which is the coast. A nice sunny day with shimmering light across the water and lots of texture in the sand and in the foliage.
Mark says, "My paintings evoke many things in me. Glimpses of my years, mementos, solitary hours, far-flung adventures, passionate struggles, and good times with dear friends." In Shimmering Light, you'll immediately feel Mark's passion for painting light and color along a bright and sunny coast. You'll see how Mark's paintings are his personal views, his own creations of scenes which matter to him in the moment. What catches Mark's attention isn't always obvious to other people, and even his own reasons for the immediate attraction are sometimes forgotten as the years go by.
This chip system that I've used, which basically each one of these chips is a color that I found in nature when I was out there doing this plein air painting.
By sharing his special blend of storytelling, passion, and painting, Mark's goal is to help you discover how to paint what you love and different ways to make the elements in your work look and feel natural. You'll be so pleased when you see sand and grass come to life rather than looking like dull patches of tan and green. In his decades of experience, Mark has created methods that can be used in almost any landscape painting. Learning from such an experienced artist will help you advance quickly and without getting tripped up in trial and error. You can skip the experimenting and incorporate Mark's techniques into your own work right away. This course contains many crucial learning points from Mark that will benefit you tremendously.